Cavaliers transparently said to everybody, we were looking at the brackets. We think it would be easier to play the Detroit Pistons in round 2 than to play the Celtics in round 2. So you mean to tell me that on Al Gore's internet, that they went out and telegraphed to the team that lives off of spite that you want to play them, that you're telling the team that specializes, that majors in physicality, and you don't, that you want to play them? I don't know if I'd want to be saying that out loud. I might let the chips fall where they may, and so be it, and say, well, maybe we can out-talent Detroit or whatever the case may be. But I'm not telling Detroit I want to play them, and I think those things can turn back to bite you in the playoffs.
So the 3-4 seed here, I mentioned it. The Pistons are a half game behind New York right now for the 3 seed. As you look at those two,
Cleveland's half a game behind.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
Who should want that? Like the 3-4 battle, as you've just laid out there, and we're looking at the first, second round of the playoffs and who they could eventually meet. What are the Cavs better as a 3 seed? Are they better as the 4 seed? What's the better matchup for them?
Well, I think New York wants no part of Detroit in the second round. I think they would. I think for my purposes and for purposes of drama and ESPN and everything else, I love rivalries. I would love to see Detroit and New York match up again, not just so I could go home and spend a couple days and bring y'all around, but I think that would be the drama. But I think Cleveland, they would rather play Detroit. I don't know if that's a better matchup for anybody. Look, when you get to the second round of the playoffs, you can't duck anybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's a tough matchup. You look out west, there's no easy matchups once you get to the semifinals of the NBA. So while it looks like you should avoid Boston, and I understand that Boston's the favorite, Boston has questions too. So while you're messing around and saying, well, we want to avoid Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, like we got to see Jason Tatum play every other day in the playoff series. We got to see the Baylor Shiremans of the world and the Nemias Quedas in the world play in high-stakes playoff basketball. Just because it says Celtics doesn't mean it's Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday and all those guys that won that championship 2 years ago. That team did lose in the second round last year. We're giving them a lot of credit as they have deserved and earned. But once again, there's no easy matchups here.
Well, far be it from me to be a little presumptuous. Let's get to the second round first, because these first round matchups are not a given, especially if you're looking at that Atlanta Hawks team at the 5 spot. I don't know, like say you want to play Detroit in the second round. You got to get through an Atlanta Hawks team that is absolutely feisty. Yes, they lost last night, but they were able to give Cleveland some real problems down the stretch. That is a team with all of those wings, with all of those guys, with the versatility, with the way that NAW is playing as a point guard, with Jalen Johnson as an all-NBA type player, they are going to give whoever they play in the first round fits. That is going to be a long series. And if I'm Cleveland, one thing you don't want when you got James Harden on your team is a long series. I don't want to hear the words Game 6 or Game 7 if James Harden is anywhere on my roster. So don't talk to me about a second round. You got to beat Atlanta. I think, Toronto's a little bit of an easier matchup, but they still got some dogs on that team too. Don't do all this thinking about who you're going to place in the second round. You got to beat somebody in the first round, and there are no slouches in the East right now.
So you bring up James Harden. Obviously, they acquire him at the deadline. There's an interesting stat here. So they were up 112, the Cavs that is. They were up 112-110, 5 minutes to go. So they're 13-14 now since he joined the team February 7th in clutch time, 13-14 in clutch time. We know the narrative around James Harden in the postseason. We know all about what his postseason success has not been. But how much better suited for a long playoff run is this Cavs team with him on the roster?
Well, they're better suited than they were with Darius Garland, with the way that he was playing. Now, Darius Garland's playing a little bit better in the Clippers. I don't know if there's buyer's remorse there, but they are just so much more versatile. There was similar to what we were talking about with Detroit. It was so much Donovan Mitchell offensively. James Harden gives him some of that respite in terms of usage rate and handling the ball. And I love this James Harden-Jared Allen combination. He has brought out something in Jared Allen that we hadn't seen since he was, playing with James Harden. And so I think that helps in that regard. But all of these guys are going to have to do some real come-to-Jesus moments when it gets late into a series, when it's Game 6 and Game 7. You got to understand James Harden may not be that same James Harden we saw games 1 through 5. How do we overcome that? Or James Harden finally turns over a new leaf when it comes to playoffs.
We've seen his movies, right? And I think the good thing about the Cavs is this. you're not dependent on James Harden to give you 40 in a game 6 or a game 7, right? You're asking him to be a facilitator, to set up Mobley and Allen, and then to turn it over to Donovan Mitchell. But Donovan Mitchell hasn't gotten past the second round either. He's the last great player who has not gotten to the conference finals, like I suppose Joel Embiid, but if he counts in that because of his body. But talk about players that have something to prove, he's on the list.
I would say the only difference with Donovan Mitchell is I can't point to playoff series and say this is Donovan Mitchell's fault that he didn't get the team to the conference final.
16 on a night where Cleveland got huge contributions from its stars. Donovan Mitchell led the way, 31 points. James Harden added 21, and Evan Mobley poured in 22. So with this win, Cleveland, they're 51-29. They can finish no lower than 4th in the East, and they're a half game behind New York for the 3rd seed right now, with 2 games remaining in the regular season. So you see those standings right there. It's the Pistons, Celtics, Knicks, and obviously Cleveland, David. How much of how legitimate of a contender is this Cavs team?
Cavs are a legitimate contender. Yes, look, let's start with the flaws because I know Vince, you're looking at me, how you looking at me. They are a flawed team, but every team at the top of the East is a flawed team. So let's start with the flaws. Yes, I have real concerns with James Harden come game 6 or game 7. I have real concerns with them defensively because their defense has fallen off a cliff since James Harden has been there, especially in these last few games. But what we saw last night especially is the reemergence of a guy that I thought was going to have a much better season, which was Evan Mobley at 19 rebounds, 3 blocks, 22 points against Atlanta. They dominated in that paint. Jared Allen and James Harden have something there as a 1-2 punch. And then Donovan Mitchell has the potential to be the best player in any of these series that they're playing. I think with that core 4, with those guys beating you up in the paint, with 2 guys in the perimeter who you cannot stop, they can go out there and compete with anybody. Now, if you're giving me talking about a game 6 in Boston or a game 7 against New York or something like that, I will be really nervous if I'm a Cavs fan. But when you put all those pieces together, yes, they can compete with anybody in the East because every other team in the East also is just as flawed as Cleveland.
But did you just say those 2 big guys beating up on people? You see how skinny they ain't beating up on nobody.
They beat up on Atlanta last night. They can beat, like Jared Allen is a big dude. I know he's a little wiry, but he's a tall dude.
Tall dude.
19 rebounds, nothing to sniff at. Those 2 guys are going to have to play big in the East to win.
I understand from a talent perspective. You look at their talent. They can talk about hitting the high note. Their high note, when Donovan Mitchell is there, if James Harden is spraying the ball around, Evan Mobley, who I call Slim Duncan, because I just feel like he has that much potential. I'm with you.
Slim Duncan like Tim Duncan?
Slim Duncan.
Like Tim Duncan. A little too much dip on the chip. I like Evan Mobley too. That's a little dip on the chip. But
it's a big difference between being Tim Duncan and not, and he's just slimmer. That's
okay,
all.
All right, okay. All
so my point is they have more questions than any other team in the East. Detroit has the question of secondary scoring. Boston has the question of, do you have enough experience outside of Tatum and Brown with all these guys that they've had to replace? New York has the Karl Anthony Towns question. Cleveland has the question of, what's James Harden going to do late in the playoff series? Donovan Mitchell hasn't shown up in the conference finals. Their 2 big dudes are skinny dudes. And Kenny Atkinson, this is the other thing I want to focus on. The Cleveland Cavaliers